The cruel stepmother, intoxicated with rage, raised her hand against the defenseless little girl. But at the moment of impact, something unexpected happened. A mysterious glow filled the room, freezing everything around them. The impossible was about to reveal itself. If this story interests you, subscribe to our channel to receive all our exciting stories. Continuing. The office was silent at that hour of the night. Michael adjusted his tie, running his fingers over the Italian silk, while gazing at New York City through the 20th floor window. The city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, forming a golden carpet that stretched as far as the eye could. See? His reflection in the bulletproof glass showed a 45-year-old man, graying at the temples with deep circles under his eyes that even the best dermatologist couldn't disguise. His secretary had gone home hours ago, like the rest of the team. The building was practically empty, except for a few security guards and the cleaning staff. That's how he preferred it. The silence allowed him to concentrate on the numbers, the strategies, the next steps to further expand his empire in the construction industry. His thoughts were interrupted by his phone vibrating. It was Catherine, his wife. He ignored the call as he had done the last 3 times. He knew she was at another one of her charity events, probably bored and wanting his company. But he had work to do. He always did. The computer still displayed endless spreadsheets of costs and projections. Michael returned to his solid mahogany desk, loosening his tie slightly. That's when he noticed a picture frame almost hidden among piles of documents. In the photo, a girl of approximately 6 years old, brown hair tied in 2 uneven braids, large dark eyes that seemed to contain a sadness incompatible with her age. It was Emma, Catherine's daughter. Something in that gaze bothered him more than usual tonight. Perhaps it was fatigue. Perhaps it was the fact that he had barely seen the girl in recent weeks. When he was home, she seemed to hide. In fact, thinking about it, he couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her laugh or even speak. His phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text message from Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper. "Mr. Michael, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." Mrs. Wilson never sent messages, especially not at this hour of the night. In 15 years of work, she had always been extremely professional and discreet. If she was breaking this pattern, something serious must be happening. Michael responded, quickly asking her to call. The phone rang less than a minute later. "Mr. Michael?" Mrs. Wilson's voice was trembling. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, but Mrs. Catherine, she..." The housekeeper paused, as if searching for the right words. "She's very agitated today. She's been drinking more than usual." "She always drinks, Wilson. It's nothing new." "No, sir, today is different. She's very aggressive." "Emma?" Michael's heart raced. "What about Emma?" "The girl is locked in her room. Mrs. Catherine is banging on the door, screaming horrible things. I tried to intervene, but she told me to leave, said she would fire me if I didn't leave the house now." Michael was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. "Where's the driver?" "Mrs. Catherine dismissed everyone earlier. I only stayed because I was finishing organizing the kitchen." "Stay where you are, Wilson. I'm coming home now." The journey. From his office to his mansion in Westchester never seemed so long. Even at that hour, New York traffic was still considerable. Michael gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. His mind replayed small details that had previously seemed insignificant. Emma's frightened looks during breakfast, the way she would shrink when Catherine raised her voice, the marks on her arms that he had seen once and believed when his wife said they were from a fall on the playground. How long had it been since he really paid attention? How long had he been pretending not to see the signs? When he finally arrived home, the automatic gate took longer than usual to open. Michael honked impatiently. As soon as he gained entry, he parked the car haphazardly in the garage and ran inside. The sound of screaming hit him before he even opened the main door. Catherine's voice was unrecognizable, distorted by alcohol and rage. He ran up the marble stairs 2 steps at a time, following the sound to the hallway that led to Emma's room. The scene he found made his blood run cold. Catherine, wearing a wrinkled party dress, was furiously pounding on the bedroom door. Her Blonde hair, usually impeccable, was disheveled. A half-empty vodka bottle swayed in her right hand. "Open this door right now, you ungrateful little brat," Catherine screamed, her voice echoing down the hallways. "You think you can defy me? You think you can embarrass me in front of my friends? I should have left you in that orphanage." From the other side of the door, Michael could hear muffled sobs. "Catherine!" His voice thundered down the corridor. "What do you think you're doing?" She turned, staggering slightly. Her eyes were glazed over, her makeup smeared, creating dark shadows around them. For a moment, she seemed surprised to see him there. Then a crooked smile formed on her lips. "Well, look who decided to show up. The big businessman finally remembered he has a home." Michael took a step forward, keeping his eyes fixed on Catherine. Years of difficult negotiations had taught him to maintain calm even in the most tense situations, but his hands were trembling slightly. "Put that bottle down and get away from the door," he ordered, his voice controlled but firm. Catherine laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You don't tell me what to do, Michael. This little pest needs to learn a lesson. Do you know what she did today? She started crying in the middle of my charity event, in front of all my friends." She took another swig from the bottle. "How embarrassing. Everyone looking, whispering. A normal child doesn't act like that. She's 6 years old, Catherine. She's a manipulator, just like her biological mother. That tramp deceived me, said she would disappear after the adoption, but she died before signing the final papers. And now I'm stuck with this." She kicked the door hard, making Michael jump. From the other side, Emma's sobs grew louder. The revelation hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. He had always believed Emma was Catherine's biological daughter, the product of a previous relationship. That's what she had told him when they met 2 years ago. Another lie in a web that was now beginning to unravel. "How long?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "What? How long have you been mistreating her?" Catherine staggered backward, feigning indignation. "Mistreat? Me? I'm just trying to educate this child. You're never here. You don't know how difficult." "She is. Nothing I do is good enough, nothing I give her." "Like the marks on her arms 3 months ago?" Michael interrupted her. "That wasn't any fall, was it?" Catherine's face contorted in fury. "You don't understand anything. I had to sacrifice everything for this girl. My freedom, my youth. And she's not even really mine. I only took her because—" Catherine stopped abruptly, realizing too late what she was about to reveal. "Because what?" Michael came closer. "Why did you really adopt her, Catherine?" The silence that followed was deafening. Only Emma's muffled sobs were audible. Catherine took another swig from the bottle, her eyes avoiding Michael's. "Because I knew rich men like you adore a sad story," she finally whispered, her voice loaded with cynicism. "A beautiful woman, raising an adopted child alone. So noble. Isn't it? That's how I hooked the other two before you." The confession made Michael's stomach turn. "Other two? Oh, what's the surprise? You think you were the first rich idiot who fell for this story? Why do you think I have so much money of my own?" She laughed, a bitter sound. "But you were the grand prize, the richest, the most influential, and so busy you didn't even notice what was happening under your nose." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the wave of nausea that hit him. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. There was no more hesitation. "Get away from that door," he ordered. "Or what?" Catherine took another swig from the bottle. "You'll hit me. You'll call your expensive lawyers. You'll try to destroy me. I have evidence of all your shady business dealings, darling. Every bribe, every forged document." "I said," Michael interrupted her, his voice sharp as steel, "get away from that door." Something in his tone must have cut through Catherine's alcoholic haze, because she took a step back. Michael took advantage of the opening to position himself between her and the door. "Emma?" he called softly. "Emma, it's me, Michael. Can you open the door?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a soft click indicated that the door was being unlocked. Michael turned the handle slowly, keeping Catherine in his field of vision. The room was dark, illuminated only by the hallway. Light coming through the half-open door. Emma was huddled in a corner, hugging a worn teddy bear. Her little face was stained with tears, and Michael could see red marks on her arms where Catherine must have grabbed her earlier. "No one is going to hurt you," he promised, his voice gentle. "I won't let them." It was then that Catherine, taking advantage of his momentary distraction, lunged into the room. The vodka bottle in her hand arced through the air, aimed at Emma's head. Michael reacted by instinct. In a quick movement, he placed himself between Catherine and the girl. The bottle hit his shoulder with enough force to elicit a scream of pain, but he didn't move. The glass shattered, scattering shards and liquid across the floor. The sound of the impact seemed to break something inside Emma. She screamed for the first time that night, a high-pitched, terrified sound that reverberated off the walls of the room. Emma's scream seemed to awaken something in Michael. Ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder, he moved quickly, pushing Catherine out of the room with a force he didn't know he possessed. She stumbled backward, hitting the corridor wall, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mrs. Wilson!" Michael called, his voice echoing through the house. The housekeeper appeared almost instantly, as if she had been waiting near the stairs. "Take Emma to your room and stay with her. Don't leave her alone for even a minute." The grey-haired lady hurried into the room, avoiding the glass shards scattered across the floor. Emma was still crying, but allowed Mrs. Wilson to pick her up. The housekeeper wrapped her in her protective arms, whispering words of comfort, as she carried her away from the scene. As soon as they disappeared down the corridor, Michael turned to Catherine. She had slid to the floor, sitting with her back against the wall, a crooked smile still playing on her lips. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice slurred. "Everything you've built, everything you have, I'll destroy it all." Michael ignored her, taking his phone from his pocket. His fingers trembled slightly as he dialed a number. "Dr. Thompson. I'm sorry to call at this hour." He paused, listening to the response on the other end. "I need you to come to my house now. Yes, now. It's an emergency." Catherine laughed, a harsh, lifeless sound. "Calling your private lawyer? You think that's going to help?" "It's not the contract, Thompson," Michael responded, his voice cold. "It's Dr. Thompson, the psychiatrist." The smile disappeared from Catherine's face. "You wouldn't dare." "I would, and I'm going to do much more." Michael approached, crouching to be at eye level with her. "You lied about everything. About being Emma's biological mother, about your past, about other marriages. How many more were there besides the two you mentioned? And what happened to those men?" Catherine looked away, but Michael continued. "You used an innocent child as bait. You hurt her, traumatized her, and now you tried... He couldn't complete the sentence, the image of the bottle flying toward Emma's head still vivid in his mind. "Going to have me committed? Is that it?" Catherine tried to stand up, but her wobbly legs betrayed her. "You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything." Michael stood up, looking down at her. "The security cameras in the house record sound, Catherine. Every word you said today is recorded. Every confession about the other marriages, about how you planned everything." Her face paled. "You're bluffing. Want to risk it?" He took a step back. "Dr. Thompson will arrive in a few minutes. He'll evaluate your condition and, considering your level of intoxication and what just happened, he'll recommend an emergency. Commitment for detoxification and psychiatric evaluation. You can't force me. I can and I will. It's either that or the police. Choose." The silence that followed was heavy. Downstairs, they could hear Mrs. Wilson humming softly, probably trying to calm Emma. "While you're committed, Michael," continued, his voice showing no emotion, "my private investigators will discover everything about your past, every lie, every scam, every man you deceived, and most importantly, they'll find out how you really got custody of Emma." Catherine closed her eyes, tears of anger running down her made-up face. "You don't understand. I was desperate. I don't care about your justifications." Michael checked his watch. "Dr. Thompson should arrive in 10 minutes. I suggest you use that time to think very carefully about your next actions. Because if you try to use any supposed information about my business against me, everything we discover about you will go straight to the police. And believe me, with what you confess today, plus what we'll find out, you won't get anywhere near Emma for the next 20 years. The sound of a car approaching caught both their attention. Through the corridor window, they could see headlights coming up the mansion's driveway. "It's over, Catherine," Michael said, his voice now heavy with exhaustion. "It's over." She didn't respond. She sat there on the floor, suddenly looking much smaller and older. The mask of the sophisticated woman had completely shattered, revealing just a broken and empty person inside. The intercom rang, announcing the doctor's arrival. Michael went downstairs to receive him, leaving Catherine alone in the corridor. His thoughts, however, were in Mrs. Wilson's room, where a frightened little girl desperately needed to know she was safe. Dr. Thompson examined Catherine for almost an hour. Michael waited in the first-floor study, where he could hear occasional footsteps upstairs. His shoulder throbbed where the bottle had hit him, but he refused to tend to the wound before. Everything was resolved. Finally, the doctor came down the stairs. His face was grave when he entered the study. "She needs specialized help, Michael," he said without preamble. "The level of alcohol intoxication is concerning, but the psychological condition is even more serious. Catherine shows clear signs of personality disorder. The compulsive lying, the manipulation, the lack of empathy. This didn't start today." Michael ran his hand over his tired face. "Will she accept commitment?" "She already has. In fact, after the alcohol effect started to wear off, she seemed relieved." The doctor paused. "But I need to warn you, the recovery process, if there is any, will be long. And considering what you told me about the situation with the child—" "Emma," Michael interrupted. "Her name is Emma." "Considering the situation with Emma," the doctor continued, "you need to take immediate legal measures. The girl cannot remain in Catherine's custody." "I know." Michael stood up, walking to the window. The night was clear, with a full moon illuminating the well-kept garden. It seemed surreal that just a few hours earlier, he had been in his office, concerned only with numbers and contracts. "I've already called my lawyer. She's preparing the documents to file for emergency custody." "Good." Dr. Thompson made some notes on his tablet. "The ambulance should arrive in 20 minutes to take Catherine to the clinic. We need your signature on some documents." Michael signed everything mechanically, barely registering the words on the papers. His mind was focused on Emma. How was she? What was going through her head at that moment? After the doctor left to make the final preparations, Michael went upstairs toward Mrs. Wilson's room. He knocked softly on the door. "Come in," the housekeeper's voice responded. The room was illuminated only by the bedside lamp, creating a welcoming environment. Emma was lying on Mrs. Wilson's bed, finally asleep, still clutching her teddy bear. Her face, even in sleep, maintained a tense expression. "How is she?" Michael whispered. "It took a long time for her to calm down, Mrs. Wilson responded in the same tone. "She cried so much that she became exhausted." The lady hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Mr. Michael, there's something you need to know." She got up from the chair where she was sitting and went to her wardrobe. From a drawer of clothes, she removed a simple hardcover school notebook. "I found this 2 weeks ago when I was tidying Emma's room." Mrs. Wilson extended the notebook to Michael. "I didn't know what to do. I was afraid that if I told you, Mrs. Catherine—" Michael opened the notebook. On the first pages, he found typical children's drawings: houses, flowers, sun. But as he progressed, the images became darker. Dark figures, sad faces, a small girl always alone in a corner. "Turn to the last pages," Mrs. Wilson indicated, her voice trembling slightly. What Michael saw made his heart ache. Emma had drawn what appeared to be herself, huddled beneath a table, while a large dark figure loomed over her. In another drawing, the same figure held something that looked like a bottle. The tear stains on the paper were evident. "I should have said something sooner," Mrs. Wilson whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "But Mrs. Catherine always made it clear that if I tried to interfere, I would be fired. And I was afraid of not being here to protect Emma when I could." Michael closed the notebook, feeling nausea. How many signs had he ignored? How many times had he chosen to believe Catherine's convenient lies instead of seeing what was happening, right under his nose? A soft sound caught his attention. Emma stirred in the bed, her little face contorting in an expression of fear. She was having a nightmare. Without thinking, Michael approached and sat on the edge of the bed. Gently, he began to stroke the girl's hair as his own mother used to do when he was small and had nightmares. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now, I promise." Gradually, Emma's expression softened and she returned to a more peaceful sleep. Outside, the sound of an approaching siren indicated that the ambulance had arrived. The days that followed were the most difficult Michael had ever faced. The mansion, once so silent, now seemed to echo with the ghosts of what had happened. Each room held memories he preferred to forget, moments when he should have noticed, should have acted. Emma remained silent for the first 3 days after Catherine's commitment. She no longer cried, but she also didn't speak. She spent hours, sitting by her bedroom window, hugging her teddy bear, observing the garden with distant eyes. Meals were a particular challenge. She barely touched her food, as if afraid someone would take the plate away from her at any moment. Michael cancelled all his meetings, delegated important projects, reorganized his entire life. For the first time in years, work was not his priority. He spent the day at the mansion, trying to find a way to approach Emma, to make her understand that she was safe. It was Mrs. Wilson who first noticed the small changes. She asked about you this morning, the housekeeper commented during breakfast. When she woke up and didn't see you at the breakfast table, her little eyes searched everywhere. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. What did she say? She asked quietly, "Where's Uncle Michael?" It was the first time she's spoken since that night. That afternoon, while working on his laptop in the living room, Michael noticed a movement from the corner of his eye. Emma was standing in the doorway, her teddy bear firmly hugged against her chest, observing him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hi, Emma," he said softly, closing his computer. "Do you want to sit here with me?" She didn't respond, but she also didn't run away. After a few moments of hesitation, she took 2 tentative steps into the room. "You know," Michael continued, keeping his voice calm, "this sofa is too big just for me, and I'm sure your teddy would like to rest a bit here too." A ghost of a smile passed across Emma's face, so quick that Michael almost missed it. She came a little closer, still cautious, until finally climbing onto the sofa. She sat at the other end, maintaining distance, but it was progress. "What's his name?" Michael asked, pointing to the teddy bear. Emma hugged the stuffed animal tighter before whispering, "Popcorn." "Popcorn?" Michael smiled. "That's a really cool name. Why did you choose that name?" "Because..." She hesitated, her voice so low that he had to lean in to hear. "Because he's fluffy and warm like fresh popcorn." It was the longest phrase she had said since the incident. Michael felt his eyes burn with contained tears. "Have you had popcorn for a long time?" Emma nodded slowly. "The lady at the orphanage gave him to me. Before..." She stopped abruptly, her small body tensing. "It's okay," Michael assured quickly. "You don't have to talk about that if you don't want to." Silence returned to fill the room, but it was different now, less heavy, less frightening. Emma relaxed, a bit on the sofa, her fingers playing distractedly with Popcorn's worn ear. "Uncle Michael," she called after a few minutes. "Yes? Will she come back?" The question hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. The fear in Emma's voice was palpable, real, making his heart ache. "No," he answered firmly. "She won't come back." "Emma, I promise, you're safe here." Emma hugged Popcorn tighter, as if she needed to hold on to something. But what if she gets angry again? What if she comes looking for me?" Michael moved on the sofa, coming a little closer, but still maintaining enough distance not to frighten her. "Emma, look at me." He waited until her large, frightened eyes met his. "I won't let anything bad happen to you. Never again. I know. It's hard to believe that now, but I promise I will always protect you." A solitary tear ran down her face. "Always, always." "Always, always," he confirmed, feeling his own voice falter. Emma was silent for a long moment, as if processing that, information. Then, to Michael's complete surprise, she moved on the sofa, reducing the distance between them. There was still considerable space, but it was less than before. "Popcorn said he believes you," she whispered, looking at the teddy bear in her arms. Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "Tell Popcorn I'm very happy to hear that." A week. After Catherine's commitment, Michael's lawyer, Jennifer Richards, appeared at the mansion, carrying a folder full of documents. Emma was in the garden with Mrs. Wilson, watering the flowers, an activity she had begun to enjoy in recent days. "The situation is complex, Michael," Jennifer explained, spreading papers across the desk in the study. "Emma's adoption... There are serious irregularities in the process." Michael sat heavily in his chair. "What kind of irregularities?" "For starters, Catherine never had full legal custody. We found records showing she obtained temporary custody through a process full of dubious documents. Emma's biological mother died before signing the renunciation of parental rights, as Catherine herself confessed that night. And the biological father? Not listed in the record, but that's not even the most concerning part." Jennifer pulled out another document. "We discovered that Catherine has done this before. Twice. In both cases, she approached children in vulnerable situations, obtained temporary custody through questionable means, and then used the children to get close to rich men," Michael completed, feeling nauseous. "What happened to those children?" "One is in a foster home in Chicago. The other," Jennifer hesitated, "is in a shelter in Los Angeles. Apparently, after Catherine got what she wanted from the second marriage, she simply abandoned the girl." Michael stood up abruptly, walking to the window. From there, he could see Emma in the garden, smiling shyly, while Mrs. Wilson showed her how to prune the roses. It was the first real smile he had seen on her face since that night. "What do we need to do?" "I've already filed for termination of Catherine's parental rights," Jennifer explained. "With the evidence we have, the security camera videos, Mrs. Wilson's testimony, Emma's drawings, plus the irregularities we discovered in the adoption process, it shouldn't be difficult to achieve. And then?" "Then?" Jennifer made a significant pause. "Emma will need a new legal guardian." Michael turned to face her. "I want custody of her." "I figured you would say that." Jennifer smiled slightly. "That's why I've already prepared all the necessary documentation, but I need you to understand it won't be easy. You're single, you work long hours, you have no experience with children." "I've changed my routine," Michael interrupted her. "Reorganized the entire company. I don't spend all day at the office anymore, and I have more than enough resources to ensure she has everything she needs: education, therapy, activities. It's not just a matter of resources, Michael. Emma has suffered severe trauma. She's going to need much more than material comfort. She'll need time, patience, dedication." "I know." Michael looked back out the window. Emma was now sitting on the grass, making a daisy chain with Mrs. Wilson's help. "And that's exactly what I intend to give her." At that moment, as if she sensed she was being watched, Emma looked up at the study window. Upon seeing Michael, she waved timidly, holding up the slightly crooked flower crown she had just made. Michael waved back, feeling something warm and protective grow in his chest. "That girl has suffered too many abandonments in her life," he said to Jennifer, without taking his eyes off Emma. "I won't be another one to leave her." "Then we need to prepare for a battle," Jennifer said, her voice taking on a professional tone. "The judge will want to see that you're truly committed to this. You'll need to take a course for adoptive parents, undergo psychological evaluations, prove that you can offer not just material support, but emotional support as well. I'll do whatever it takes. We also need to prepare for the possibility of a biological relative claiming custody. If we find the father..." "Find him," Michael interrupted. "Search everywhere. If he exists, if he's alive, he has the right to know about his daughter. But..." He turned to face the lawyer. "Make it clear that I will fight for her custody with all my strength." Jennifer nodded, making notes. "I'll need to talk to Emma too. At some point, the judge will want to hear her opinion." "Not yet," Michael said firmly. "She's just starting to feel safe now. I don't want to frighten her with more changes and uncertainties. Let's wait a few more weeks. Let her grow stronger." In the garden, Emma had stood up and was now walking toward the house, still holding the flower crown. Mrs. Wilson followed close behind, carrying the watering can and gardening tools. "Uncle Michael," her voice, still timid but stronger than in previous days, reached the study. "I made something for you. I need to go," Michael said to Jennifer, already moving toward the door. "Send all the documents I need to sign today." The lawyer smiled, beginning to gather the papers. "You know something? I think you're going to be a great father." Autumn arrived, bringing cold winds and yellowed leaves that danced through the mansion's garden. 2 months had passed since the night that changed everything. The house, once so cold and impersonal, was beginning to gain touches of life and color. Emma's drawings decorated the refrigerator, toys occupied a corner of the living room, and laughter, still timid but increasingly frequent, echoed through the corridors. That Saturday morning, Michael observed Emma through the kitchen window. She was playing in the garden with Popcorn, her inseparable teddy bear, building what appeared to be a house with dry leaves. Her cheeks, once so pale, now had a healthy flush, and she had gained some weight since she began eating regularly. "Breakfast is ready, Mr. Michael," Mrs. Wilson announced, placing a stack of pancakes with chocolate syrup on the table. Emma's new favorite breakfast. "Emma," Michael called through the window, "come have breakfast." The girl raised her head, smiling when she saw him. In recent days, her smiles came more easily, lighting up her little face in a way that made Michael's heart clench. "Coming," she replied, picking up Popcorn and running toward the house. She stopped at the door to remove her dirt-covered shoes, a habit Mrs. Wilson had taught her and which she religiously followed. When she sat at the table, her eyes sparkled at the sight of the pancakes. "There's chocolate syrup." "Of course there is," Mrs. Wilson smiled, serving her a glass of milk. "Today is a special day, isn't it?" Emma nodded, picking up her fork with enthusiasm. In recent days, she no longer showed that fear that food would be taken away from her, although she still had the habit of eating too quickly. "Slow down, little one," Michael gently reminded her. "The food isn't going to run away." She slowed her pace, chewing more slowly. "Sorry," she mumbled between bites, "it's just so delicious." Michael exchanged a significant look with Mrs. Wilson. Today would be an important day. Emma's first meeting with the child psychologist that Jennifer had recommended. They had been preparing the girl for days, explaining that it would be someone nice to talk to and play with. "Emma," Michael began softly, "do you remember that today we're going to meet Dr. Sarah?" The girl lowered her fork, her expression becoming serious. "I remember. Are you scared?" She hugged Popcorn tighter against her chest, a gesture Michael had already learned to recognize as a sign of anxiety. "A little bit." "You know," Michael leaned on the table, moving closer to her, "when I was little, about your age, I also needed to talk to someone like Dr. Sarah." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? Really? It was after my father died. I was very sad, didn't want to talk to anyone, but this person helped me a lot. She had an office full of toys, and we would talk while playing." "And?" Emma hesitated, playing with a piece of pancake. "Did it hurt?" The innocent question made Michael's heart clench. How many times had she been hurt to have this constant fear of pain? "No, little one. It doesn't hurt at all. It's just a conversation. And if you don't want to talk about something, you don't have to. Dr. Sarah just wants to meet you, play a little, and Popcorn can come too." "He can?" Her little face lit up a bit. "Of course he can. And I'll be waiting right outside. If you need me, just call." Emma seemed to think for a moment, consulting Popcorn in a whisper as she always did when she needed to make an important decision. "Popcorn says it's okay then," she finally announced, "but he wants to know if he can wear his bow tie when he visits the flowers." Michael smiled, feeling that now familiar tightness in his chest, a mixture of love and protection that grew each day. "I'm glad Popcorn agrees. Now how about finishing those pancakes? Afterward, you can help me choose a tie to wear today." "The blue one," she said immediately, her eyes sparkling. "It matches your eyes. Mrs. Wilson said so." The housekeeper laughed, winking at Michael. In recent weeks, she had become a precious ally, not just helping with Emma, but also teaching Michael the small details of daily care for a child, things he never imagined he would need to know. "You know," Emma continued, now more animated, "I made a leaf house outside for popcorn. Want to see it later?" "Of course I do," Michael responded, observing how she resumed eating with more enthusiasm. "After the appointment, we can even make a bigger house. What do you think? With branches and everything? And can it have a window?" "It can have as many windows as you want." Emma smiled, a smile that reached her eyes, something that was happening more frequently in recent days. It was as if, little by little, she was learning that it was safe to be happy, that no one would punish her for showing joy. Outside, the dry leaves continued their dance in the wind, and the autumn sun painted golden shadows in the garden. It was a new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of possibilities. The waiting room of Dr. Sarah Johnson's office was welcoming, decorated with soft colors and comfortable furniture. Emma sat tensely beside Michael, popcorn firmly hugged against her chest. Her little feet, which didn't reach the floor, swung nervously. "Everything's okay," Michael whispered, noticing how she shrank when the office door opened. A woman of about 40 with curly hair and a gentle smile appeared at the door. "Emma," she called softly. The girl squeezed the teddy bear tighter, looking at Michael with frightened eyes. "Hi, Emma." The psychologist approached slowly, maintaining a comfortable distance. "I'm Sarah. And who's this friend you have with you?" Emma hesitated for a moment before responding in a low voice. "This is Popcorn." "What a cool name," Sarah smiled. "You know, I have some friends inside who would love to meet Popcorn. There's a giraffe who loves making new friends. Would you like to meet her?" The mention of other toys seemed to awaken Emma's curiosity. She looked at Michael again as if asking permission. "Go ahead," he encouraged her. "Remember what we agreed. I'll wait right here." Emma got up slowly, still holding Popcorn tightly. Before following, "Sarah," she turned one last time, "promise you won't leave." "I promise," Michael responded, feeling his voice falter a little. "I'll be right here when you come back." The following hour was one of the longest in Michael's life. He tried to work on his tablet, answer emails, but his mind always returned to Emma. How was she? Was she scared? Was she... His thoughts were interrupted by his phone ringing. It was Jennifer. "We have a situation." The lawyer got straight to the point. "We found Emma's biological father." Michael felt his heart stop for a moment. "Where?" "Denver. His name is David Miller. Jennifer paused. "He didn't know he had a daughter, Michael. Emma's mother never told him about the pregnancy." Michael closed his eyes, feeling a wave of dizziness. Does he want to meet her?" "Yes. In fact, he's devastated about losing so many years. He's already hired a lawyer and another. He's going to petition for custody of Emma." The world seemed to spin around Michael. The possibility of losing Emma was something he couldn't even contemplate. In recent weeks, she had become the center of his world, his reason for waking up early, for coming home, for being a better person. "Michael, are you still there?" "I am," he responded mechanically. What can we do?" "Look, the situation is delicate. He's the biological father, he has rights. But we also have strong arguments in our favor. Emma has already gone through too much trauma. She's beginning to establish herself, create bonds. Taking her out of this environment now could be very harmful to her." The office door opened and Emma came out holding Sarah's hand. To Michael's surprise, she was smiling. "I need to hang up," he whispered into the phone. "Send me all the details by email." "Uncle Michael!" Emma ran to him, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dr. Sarah has a huge dollhouse and popcorn made. Friends with the giraffe." Michael forced himself to smile, saving his concerns for later. "Really? Tell me more about it." While Emma talked animatedly about her session, Sarah signaled for Michael to follow her to her desk. Emma was distracted, playing with popcorn and a small stuffed giraffe that the psychologist had allowed her to take. "She's an amazing child," Sarah said in a low voice. "Very resilient. But the trauma she suffered is deep, Michael. It will take time and a lot of work for her to recover completely. I know, he responded, observing how Emma showed Popcorn the details of the giraffe. I'll do whatever it takes. I noticed that you've already built a strong bond, Sarah continued. She trusts you. In her circumstances, that's extraordinary. We need to preserve and strengthen that trust. Michael felt his throat tighten, thinking about the news he had just received. How could he tell Emma about her biological father? How? To explain that her life could change again? Uncle Michael? Emma's voice brought him back to the present. Can we go make the leaf house now? With the windows you promised? He knelt to be at her height, noticing how her eyes, once always frightened, now shone with hope and confidence. Of course we can, little one. We're going to make the best leaf house this garden has ever seen. Emma smiled, taking his hand. With her free little hand, the other still held Popcorn and the new giraffe. Her touch was like a reminder of everything that was at stake, of everything he could lose. But for now, Michael decided he would focus only on the present, on her smile, on the leaf house they would build, on the trust she placed in him. Tomorrow, with all its fears and uncertainties, could wait. The news arrived on a rainy Tuesday. David Miller had obtained a court authorization to visit Emma. Michael received the email from Jennifer during breakfast, while observing the girl drawing at the kitchen table. She was concentrated, her tongue appearing slightly at the corner of her mouth as she carefully colored what appeared to be a rainbow. "It's very beautiful," he commented, trying to keep his voice steady despite the apprehension he felt. Emma raised her eyes, smiling. "It's for Dr. Sarah. She said I can decorate a little piece of the wall in her office." In the last 2 weeks, the sessions with the psychologist had become one of Emma's favorite moments. Sarah had managed, with patience and affection, to begin unearthing the wounds that Catherine had left. Gradually, Emma was beginning to talk about her fears, her sorrows, her small joys. "Emma," Michael began, knowing he could no longer postpone that conversation, "I need to tell you something important." Something in his voice must have alerted the girl because she immediately put down her colored pencil, her eyes filling with apprehension. "Did something bad happen?" "No, little one, it's nothing bad." Michael took a deep breath. "You know that everyone has a father and a mother, right?" Emma nodded slowly, hugging Popcorn, who was beside her on the table. "Well, we found your father, your real father, and he really wants to meet you." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma remained completely still, her eyes fixed on Michael with an intensity that broke his heart. "He didn't know about you before," Michael continued softly. "No one had told him that you existed. But now that he knows, he really wants to meet you. Will I?" Emma's voice was just a whisper. "Will I have to go away?" "No," Michael responded quickly, although he knew he couldn't promise that with certainty. "For now, he just wants to meet you. He'll come here to the house on Saturday." Emma lowered her eyes to Popcorn, whispering something Michael couldn't hear. "What is it, little one?" "Popcorn is scared," she said, her voice trembling. He doesn't want another angry adult." Michael felt his heart constrict. He got up from his chair and knelt beside her, getting to her eye level. "Look at me, Emma. Your father isn't like her. He seems to be a good person who was very sad that he couldn't meet you before, and I'll be here the whole time. Okay, I won't let anything bad happen to you or Popcorn. Promise?" "I promise." Emma was silent for a few moments, as if processing it all. Then, to Michael's surprise, she extended Popcorn toward him. "What is it?" "He wants a hug from you," she explained. "To be braver." Michael took the teddy bear carefully, hugging it gently. "Like this?" Emma nodded, a small smile beginning to form on her lips. Now he's less scared. When Michael returned Popcorn, Emma hugged him for a long moment before turning her attention back to the drawing. But her hands trembled slightly as she held the pencil, and the colors that were once vibrant now seemed more hesitant. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Michael consulted Sarah about the best way to conduct the meeting, reorganized the house 3 times, and spent sleepless nights thinking of all possible scenarios. Emma, for her part, became quieter. She returned to hiding in her room for long periods, though she hadn't reverted to the more concerning behaviors from the beginning. In her sessions with Sarah, according to the psychologist, she expressed a confused mixture of fear and curiosity about her biological father. When Saturday finally arrived, the mansion was immersed in palpable tension. Emma had chosen her favorite dress, blue with small embroidered flowers, and Mrs. Wilson had made elaborate braids in her hair. Popcorn was especially well-groomed, wearing a bow tie that Michael had bought specifically for the occasion. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 in the afternoon. Emma, who was sitting on the living room sofa, grabbed Michael's hand tightly. "Remember," he whispered to her, "I'll be here the whole time." When the door opened, revealing a man in his early 40s, brown hair just like Emma's and gentle eyes, Michael felt her little hand squeeze his even tighter. David Miller seemed as nervous as his daughter, his eyes immediately filling with tears upon seeing Emma for the first time. The moment of truth had arrived, and Michael silently prayed that whatever the outcome of this meeting, Emma would not be hurt anymore. The silence in the room was dense, almost palpable. David Miller remained standing near the door, as if fearing that any sudden movement might frighten Emma. The girl, in turn, was partially hidden behind Michael, only her large, curious eyes visible as she observed the man who was her biological father. "Hi, Emma," David said softly, his voice choked with emotion. I brought something for you." He took a small, colorful package from the bag he was carrying. Emma squeezed Michael's hand tighter, but her eyes remained fixed on the package. "Do you want to see what it is?" Michael asked gently. Emma nodded slowly, though she didn't move from her improvised hiding place behind him. David approached with cautious steps, maintaining a respectful distance, and extended the present. Michael took the package and handed it to Emma, who examined it carefully before beginning to open it. Inside was a storybook, with a beautifully illustrated cover showing a girl in a garden full of flowers. "The Dream Gardener," said the title, in golden letters. "It was my favorite book when I was little," David explained, still keeping his voice soft. "My mother, your grandmother, used to read it to me every night." Emma carefully leafed through the pages, her fingers lightly tracing the illustrations. "It's pretty," she whispered, so softly it was barely audible. "It has many different stories," David continued, "all about a girl who planted magical flowers in her garden. Each flower had a special power. Some brought smiles, others healed sorrows." "Like the roses in the garden?" Emma asked, coming out a little from behind Michael. "You like gardens?" David's face lit up. Emma nodded, gaining more confidence. "Mrs. Wilson and I take care of the flowers, and I made a leaf house with Uncle Michael." "Is that so?" David smiled. "You know, I work with gardens. I'm a landscape architect. That means I design and take care of gardens for other people." Emma's eyes widened with genuine interest. "You make real gardens?" "Yes, actually." David hesitated for a moment, looking at Michael as if asking permission. When he nodded slightly, David continued, "I have a nursery. It's a big place full of flowers and plants of all kinds. If you want, someday when you feel comfortable, I can show you." Emma looked at Michael, who smiled encouragingly. "That would be nice, wouldn't it? Whenever you want." The girl seemed to consider the idea for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she took a small step forward, still holding Popcorn and the book. "This is Popcorn," she said, raising the teddy bear. "He likes flowers too." David smiled, his eyes shining with contained tears. "Hi, Popcorn, it's a pleasure to meet you." "He's wearing a special bow tie today," Emma explained, her voice gaining a little more confidence. "Uncle Michael gave it to him." "It's a very elegant bow tie," David commented. "It matches his eyes." Emma giggled softly, a sound that made both Michael and David catch their breath. It was the first time she had shown such ease since learning about the visit. "Do you want to see my drawings?" she asked suddenly. "I'd love to," David responded, his voice faltering slightly with emotion. Emma ran to the living room table, where her drawing materials were spread out, and returned with several colored sheets. With a naturalness that surprised everyone, she sat on the rug and began to show her creations. Michael observed the scene with a mix of contradictory emotions. On one hand, his heart warmed seeing Emma opening up, showing that sweet and curious personality he had come to know in recent weeks. On the other, a deep and irrational fear consumed him. What if she became so attached to her biological father that she no longer wanted to stay with him? As if reading his thoughts, Emma looked up from the drawing she was showing. "Uncle Michael, come see too. This one is the garden I made for you, remember?" Michael joined them on the rug, sitting beside Emma. She immediately leaned against him, a gesture of trust and affection that made his heart ache. "Look," she pointed to the drawing, "here's the leaf house, and here are the roses that Mrs. Wilson taught me to take care of, and this is the bench where you tell me stories." David observed the interaction with teary eyes, clearly noting the strong bond between the two. When his eyes met Michael's, there was a mixture of gratitude and sadness in them. "Emma," he said softly, "how about you show Popcorn the pictures in the book I brought? Meanwhile, Uncle Michael and I can talk a little bit." The girl looked between the two adults, a flash of anxiety passing across her face. "Are you going to fight?" "No, little one," Michael assured. "We're just going to talk, I promise." Emma nodded slowly, taking the book and Popcorn and settling on the sofa, far enough to give the adults privacy, but close enough to keep both in her field of vision. The moment of truth had arrived. It was time for Michael and David to decide Emma's future, and neither was prepared for the conversation that would follow. Michael led David to the study, leaving the door ajar so Emma could see them. The girl pretended to be focused on the book, but her eyes occasionally rose to verify they were still there. "She's amazing," David said softly, sitting in one of the armchairs. "So smart, so sweet, and at the same time you can see the fear in her eyes. What did that woman do to my daughter?" Michael felt his stomach turn at the memory of that night. "Catherine, she hurt Emma in ways we're still discovering. The psychologist is helping, but the trauma is deep." David ran his hands over his face, trying to contain his tears. "If I had known, my God, if I had known I had a daughter. Ashley never told me about the pregnancy. We separated before she moved to New York, and I never heard from her again. When I received the call saying they had found my daughter," his voice failed. "How did you find out?" Michael asked softly. "Your lawyer found me. She did a DNA test with a sample of Emma's hair, compared it with my profile that was registered in a medical database." David raised his eyes, meeting Michael's. "I know you filed for custody." Michael nodded, feeling his heart race. "I love that girl as if she were my own daughter." "I can tell." David smiled sadly. "The way she looks at you, how she seeks your approval. She trusts you completely." "I'll fight for her," Michael said, his voice firm. "I know you're the biological father, and I respect that, but I can't lose her." To his surprise, David shook his head. "I didn't come here to take Emma away from you." Michael blinked, confused. "But your lawyer?" "I filed for paternity recognition because it's my right and duty," David explained. "But after seeing you two together today, it would be cruel to separate Emma from someone she clearly loves and trusts, especially after everything she's been through." "What are you suggesting?" "Shared custody," David answered. "You keep primary custody since Emma is established here, has her routine, her school, her psychologist. I would have the right to regular visits, could participate in her life, build a relationship gradually at her pace." Michael felt an enormous weight lift from his shoulders. "You would do that?" "It's best for her," David said simply. "Emma has already gone through too many abandonments. She needs stability, security. You can give her that. I just want the chance to be part of her life, to make up for all these lost years." A noise at the door caught the attention of both men. Emma was standing there, Popcorn in one arm and the book in the other, her large eyes alternating between the two men. "You're not fighting, are you?" she asked in a small voice. "No, little one," Michael smiled, extending his arms. Emma ran to him, climbing onto his lap. "Actually, we were talking about you." "About me?" David leaned forward slightly in his armchair. "Emma, I really want to be your dad. I didn't know you existed before, and that makes me very sad. But now that I've found you, I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me." Emma hugged Popcorn against her chest. "Will I have to leave Uncle Michael's house?" "No," David answered quickly. "You'll continue living here with Uncle Michael. I just wanted to be able to visit you sometimes, maybe take you to see my flower nursery, tell you stories. And can Uncle Michael come too?" "Of course he can," David smiled, looking gratefully at Michael. "Whenever you want." Emma seemed to think for a moment, consulting Popcorn in whispers as she always did when she needed to make an important decision. "Popcorn says it's okay then," she finally announced. "But he wants to know if he can wear his bow tie when he visits the flowers." David laughed, tears now flowing freely down his face. "Popcorn can wear all the bow ties he wants." Michael hugged Emma tighter, feeling his own face wet with tears. For the first time since receiving the news about David, he allowed himself to relax completely. Here was the solution he hadn't known he was looking for, a chance for Emma to have not just one, but two fathers who would love and protect her. 6 months passed since that first visit. Spring had arrived, and the mansion's garden was more beautiful than ever, filled with flowers that David had helped Emma plant. A special small flower bed, surrounded by colorful stones the girl herself had painted, housed her first daisy seeds. It was Sunday morning, and the house was bustling. Emma ran from one side to the other, supervising the preparations for her birthday party, the first she would have in her entire life. Wearing a new dress, blue like her favorites, she held Popcorn, who sported an especially festive bow tie. "Uncle Michael," she called, entering the study where he was finalizing some details. "Has the cake arrived yet? And the balloons? And the—" "Everything's ready, little one," he laughed, picking her up. "Want to check the list one more time?" Emma nodded energetically. In recent months, making lists had become her new favorite pastime, a suggestion from Dr. Sarah to help her deal with anxiety. "So let's go." Michael picked up a paper from the desk. "Chocolate cake with strawberry?" Check. "Colorful balloons?" Check. "Mrs. Wilson helped blow them all up." "Special grape juice?" Check. "And there's also orange for the adults." "Presents?" Emma smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Lots. Daddy David brought a super big one last night." Michael felt his heart warm hearing her call David Daddy, something that had started naturally a few weeks ago. The transition had been surprisingly smooth. David had become a constant and loving presence in Emma's life, visiting her regularly, taking her to spend some afternoons at his nursery, and actively participating in all important decisions about her well-being. "Uncle Michael." Emma's voice brought him back to the present. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course you can." She leaned in, whispering in his ear, "I made a birthday wish." "Is that so? And can I know what it is?" Emma pulled back a little, nervously biting her lip. I wanted to know if—" She hesitated, consulting Popcorn as she always did in important moments. After a few seconds, she continued, "I wanted to know if I can call you Dad too." Michael felt his breath catch. "What?" "It's just—" Emma began to play with Popcorn's bow tie, a habit she maintained when she was nervous. "Daddy David is my real dad, right? But you are too. You saved me from her. You protected me. You gave me a real home. And Popcorn said we can have 2 dads if we want." Tears were now flowing freely down Michael's face. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded, her own eyes watery. "I am. Daddy David already knows. I asked him if I could, and he said he was happy, because now I have 2 dads who love me very much." Michael hugged her tightly, feeling her small heart beat against his chest. "I love you so much, my daughter." "I love you too, Dad," she whispered, and the sound of that word made his heart almost explode with happiness. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first guests. Emma jumped from his lap, excited. "Come on, Dad, the party's about to start." Michael followed her to the living room, where Mrs. Wilson was already opening the door for David, who arrived carrying more flowers for decoration. The morning sun came through the windows, illuminating the scene with an almost magical golden light. Emma ran to hug David, who picked her up, covering her face with kisses. "Happy birthday, my princess." "Thank you, Daddy," she smiled, looking between her two fathers. "Today is the best day of my life." As he watched Emma animatedly show David the party decorations, Michael thought about how surprising life could be. Less than a year ago, he was a lonely man, living in a cold, empty house, focused only on work and numbers. Now, his house overflowed with love and laughter, and he had a family, not a traditional family perhaps, but a family full of love, respect, and understanding. Emma came running back to him, taking his hand. "Come on, Dad. Let's show Daddy David the new garden." And so, holding his daughter's hand, Michael headed to the sun-drenched garden, where flowers of all colors danced in the gentle spring breeze. The past, with all its shadows and pain, had been left behind. The future was bright, full of possibilities. Laughter and love, lots of love. After all, sometimes the most beautiful families are those we build with our hearts.